Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Kellie De Leon from Treasure Data, and we are partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT CDOIQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Doug Laney, noted author and Data and Analytics Strategy Innovation Fellow at West Monroe. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Kellie. Great to be with you.
I'm so excited for our conversation. You have such an interesting background, so I'm excited to dig into this
Thank
today.
you. Appreciate that.
I know that you have been involved with the data space for decades, and in fact, back in 2001, you kind of coined the term the 3 V's of data: volume, velocity, and variety, which now we kind of commonly refer to as big data. So I want to hear from you, from the source, after all these years, what still gets you so excited about data?
Thanks, Kellie. I'm the 3 V's guy. I'm hoping to become the 3 R's guy sometime soon here, retirement and relaxation and reading or something like that. Listen, I don't know about excited per se, but certainly I'm fascinated by data's unique economic properties. Certainly compared to any other kind of asset or resource. A lot of people compare data to oil. They call it the new oil. And really, unlike oil or anything else, data has some unique properties. It can be used over and over without getting used up. It can be used multiple ways simultaneously. And using data typically generates more data, whenever and wherever we use it. So data is what economists would call a non-depleting, non-rivalrous, progenitive asset. And as it turns out, companies that are capitalizing on these unique properties clearly are the ones that are winning in the economy today. And I guess I'd also mention that data is really also at the heart of everything digital. So I guess, okay, I am a bit excited about data. I'll admit.
Well, I love that perspective. Certainly, many people do say data is the new oil, but your point about how it can be reused and used by so many at the same time is absolutely true, and a perspective that I share, and that it can have so much power for the organizations that can use it to its biggest benefit, but can certainly also be overwhelming when you think about how data creates more data, and is the influx of it certainly in our digital world.
And listen, I get the comparison at a macro level. Certainly data is a driver of the economy today, much like oil was, maybe still is, a century ago. So I get it at a macro level, but I think it's important to understand the unique economic characteristic differences between data and oil, or data and any other kind of asset.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We have a great conversation planned. I have a lot of good questions, but I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn just out of kind of curiosity, and just to ask an interesting question before we get into depth on some of the other topics we're going to touch on. I know in the past you have actually provided some expert testimony for legal cases that were related to data and analytics. And I'm just kind of curious if you have any interesting or notable cases that you can tell us about.
Well, let's see what I can actually talk about. But yes, since publishing the book Infonomics, which I think we'll talk about in a bit, in the book, I posited some basic models for quantifying data's value. And since that time, some attorneys have invited me to testify in cases related to the theft of data. And in one interesting class action suit, I've been asked to advise on the situation where some businesses are claiming that new data privacy regulations have restricted their ability to use the customer data that they've collected, and thereby have impaired the value of their businesses. It's a really interesting question. And in another case, I was invited to testify on whether a certain well-known analytics technology company's intellectual property claims were already commonly known, and whether they qualify as protected IP. It's interesting stuff, but I would have to say that being deposed for 7 hours straight by opposing counsel is not for the faint of heart.
That's fair to say.
It's even worse. It's even worse than it looks on TV.
I bet, because you don't get to only see the edit for TV that's, where it takes 2 minutes,
Right.
right?
7 hours of somebody trying to make you look stupid and trip you up is not a lot of fun.
Yeah, that can be brutal for sure. The first case that you shared is one that's interesting to me. Working at Treasure Data, we are a customer data platform, and obviously the use of customer data is so important to us. And we know that our customers, issues around security, privacy, compliance, governance are key needs that they're trying to solve with that.
Right.
And so the idea of the opportunities and sometimes the opportunity cost that can come in navigating some of those privacy regulations that just get more and more complex, particularly if you're a global brand and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Certainly,
I mean, it
close to our heart.
It even throws into question whether data qualifies as an asset, because if people have the right to be forgotten, then is customer data really something that you control as an organization, even though you've captured it? So it gets into some kind of sticky water. I'm not an attorney. I just play one on TV, but there's some interesting questions around property rights and the legalities of data.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly issues that are related to the next topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which is really data monetization, and many of the different ways that organizations are using data to be that asset, to be that new oil, so to speak. So I know you recently contributed to an article for CDO magazine that was about a product management approach to data monetization. And I loved how you kind of talked about how golf legend Greg Norman plays each hole kind of backwards in his mind before he even tees off. And I wondered if you could just kind of share with our listeners sort of how does that process or that anecdote apply to that product management approach to data monetization?
Yeah, the concept of playing a hole backwards in golf, it's a simply beautiful concept, and it really is all about starting with the end in mind and then working backwards to where you are today. It's an approach to reverse engineering a vision. Even at West Monroe, one of our core philosophies is to work from a desired client outcome and then meet the client where they are currently. Which is kind of unique, because in my experience working for various consultancies, I think there are too many consultants or consultancies with a kind of a throw the baby out with the bathwater approach. And I don't know, we think babies are cute and need to be nurtured, need to be nurtured. So yeah, start with the end in mind, work backwards to where you are today, and reuse as much as possible. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, speaking of that, kind of the idea of a product manager starting that development process with the end in mind, and certainly with the customer in mind, and working backwards from that finished product is interesting. And as you said, not necessarily the approach that everybody takes. How do you think about how customer experience should factor into that process?
Yeah, I think maybe there's a couple of things to talk about here. Maybe one, you're referring to my serious concern about the data mesh concept, in particular how let's just say certain contemporaries are defining the data mesh, specifically that a data product should be conceived and developed by those responsible for creating the data. I think it's a dreadful idea. One should start with and focus on what the customer or the data consumer needs. And they should be the ones defining the data product. So not only does this make sense from a customer experience perspective, but also an architectural one. I mean, imagine all of the sources of data that get integrated into a typical product today. Are you really going to get the folks who manage the ERP system and the Salesforce and the finance systems and all the other systems together to define a data product for a particular user? No way, it's not going to happen. The user or customer should be, working with the product manager to define the product, who then, in turn works with data engineers and maybe analytics specialists to develop it. Yeah, so that's kind of my thought on that. The other thing to kind of consider in all of this, and I wrote a bit about this in my Infonomics book, is that increasingly the primary consumers of data are not individuals, not people, but machines. And so this sort of changes how we need to think about architecting data. And I go into detail in the book about that as well. But when we're thinking about architecting analytic environments, we need to keep in mind that very likely, if not today, then tomorrow, the primary consumer of that data or analytic output is going to be a machine, not a person.
That's such a good point. And I think it is that balance between understanding the machines that are going to use this data, and even, how things like machine learning and AI factor into how, data gets used and analyzed over time, but also coming back to that customer experience. I think we've absolutely seen a shift where we know that customers are in control and loyalty is up for grabs in a bigger ways than it ever has been. Choice and digital opportunities and all different ways that consumers can shop and shift brands, and research puts a lot of power in the hands of customers. And so understanding that they're who are ultimately paying the bills in many ways, and making their experience at the middle is super important.
This said, a lot of times customers, consumers don't really know what the art of the possible is. They don't understand what the possibility, they don't even know what data exists. They don't know how it can be used to do anything more than build pretty pie charts or dashing dashboards. And so a good product manager, data product manager, is an idea person as well, establishing a process for ideation, for conceiving new ways to leverage data in innovative and high value ways. And actually that's what most of my day consists of with clients, is kind of acting in that role for them if they don't have a data product manager already.
Thank you so much, Doug, for a very fascinating and enlightening conversation. I really appreciate your time. And I want to share with our folks that are listening that they can also visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews from Doug and from others. So thank you so much, Doug.